So the title of the talk that went out in the newsletter is, what does it mean to be free? This is a question that I am imagining that I will talk about this week and next week. It's kind of a big one. It's really the question at the center of the whole Buddhist project. Right? We have in the United States a document which gives us the right to happiness, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And it's not that Buddhism is against happiness, but it's up to something different. So you may find that as you begin to practice that you have more happiness, and that's great. But really, our practice is about what does it mean to find a slice of freedom no matter what's happening. Freedom doesn't mean that we get to a place where we have 100% pleasant experience. That's the fantasy version of it. Some of you know, I like this phrase that I learned from one of my mentors years ago. We talked about, we all carry the fantasy image of the island where it all works out. And we have different strategies for how to get there. You know, we may try the worldly strategies of, I don't know, fame, money, relationship, changing our face or our body or our friendships or whatever it is that we think will get us to the island. And we may transfer that strategy over to spiritual life and imagine, if I just meditate enough, or if I just quiet my mind, or if I just go on enough retreats. It's called spiritual materialism. That was not my phrase. That was coined by Chogyam Trungpa. Right? So we take that same mind that we have in the regular world and we just bring it on over to our spiritual life. So the quote for this talk was a quote that is given to Albert Einstein, who said, "We can't solve the problems that we have with the same mind that created them." And interestingly, as I looked up the quote, there's some dispute about whether or not he actually said that. It always happens, But it is said that he said, we need to learn a new way of thinking. And this is also at the center of the Buddhist project. That it's not exactly a new way of thinking, but that our practice is a reorienting. It's not, we come in thinking we're going to get better content, but what we're practicing is how to relate to the content that we get. Some of it's pleasant, a lot of it's not. Why? Because this realm of existence is what's called the Saha world. The Saha world is the world of samsara. It is the world of birth and death. It is the world of pleasant and unpleasant. It is the world in which Saha means to endure, that we need to learn how to work with the whole catastrophe, the whole array of what arises. And of course, I don't need to tell you, any of you, that this is the Saha world. If you read the news or you go on just look around, it's pretty clear, right? It's everywhere in us and all around us. So this is important. This shift in perspective, this shift in mind, this shift in how we think. Because mostly I hear internally in my own mind, and also from lots of other people, what should I do? What should I do? And there are many things to do. And from a Buddhist perspective, we're interested in where our doing comes from, not just what we do. And that where has to do with this shift in thinking. So one of the things that often doesn't get talked about much in these meditation circles is what's called Buddhist cosmology. Buddhist cosmology is like the theory of the world, and it's pretty unlikely that the Buddha said any of this. That may be why we don't talk about it very much, but it's kind of interesting for the perspective of what I'm pointing to tonight. And you may have seen, I looked around, but I didn't see one here, but you may have seen from time to time an image on a tanka of what's called the Wheel of Life. And the Wheel of Life, it's often being held up by a big monster. And it shows, this Wheel of Life shows these 6 different realms of existence. And they are considered realms, but they're also states of mind. So you can think about them both ways. And the human realm, the realm that we are in, is kind of in the middle. And it is the realm of both suffering and the possibility of freedom. That's our realm. And above the human realm, we have what are called the asuras, which are the jealous gods. These are the gods who have a lot more pleasant than unpleasant experience, but they're still envious. They're still looking around like, oh, you've got more than I do. Even though they've got a lot, they still have that level of suffering left. And then you have the full gods, and they're like so blissed out. They don't care what anybody else has. They're just, really happy. So you can think of these again as domains or realms, but they also are states of mind, right? That come and go. Below the human realm, there are 3 more difficult realms. And these are the animal realm. The animal realm is like the world of the id, in psychology. It's the world of get, kill, achieve, take. It's very instinctual. It's about getting what I can. It's about reproduction. It's about both greed, but also kind of reactive negativity. You may have experienced that from time to time, either being on the receiving end of it or acting that way. We all have those moments, right? So we have the animal realm, and then under that, there's this really interesting realm called the realm of the hungry ghosts. This is a very, I think, kind of unique thing that Buddhism talks about. And the image that goes with the realm of the hungry ghosts is that they're the beings who live there. And again, this could be you from time to time or me, is they have big bellies, hunger. They're hungry. And that they have these tiny, skinny little necks, so they can never get enough, right? Maybe you've met someone like that who's like just not even necessarily get enough physical or material things, but just bottomless need for reassurance, for approval. And of course, you may have been that person again from time to time who just feels this deep need, and it feels unfillable, right? That's the hungry ghost realm. And then under that, we have the hell realm. And hell realm is sort of the opposite of the God realm, where it's like pretty much 100% unpleasant, really hard to tolerate, the hell realm, right? So here we are in the middle, the human realm, where we have, it's said, just enough pleasant and unpleasant in balance. You may wonder, sometimes I do, really? Is it really feels like a little too much right about now, right? But the idea is that we can learn to be free in the midst of the onslaught. What can feel like an onslaught of pleasant and unpleasant experience. And as I'll talk about in a little bit, this is the centerpiece of our practice. We're learning how to hold our seat in the midst of it all, right? So what do I do in the face of the cries of the world depends on my state of mind, depends on the realm that I'm in. Some of you have heard me, I use this phrase all the time that I borrow from Norman Fisher, who was one of my Zen teachers. And he says, the whole of our practice can be summed up like this: not making things worse. So when we are acting from, the animal realm or the hell realm or the hungry ghost realm, sometimes from the human realm, we're often making things worse. We're reactive, right? We are not in a kind of conscious or intentional way able to take action to respond to what's happening. We're reacting rather than responding. Yeah. And in Buddhism, we talk about karma as action. Karma means action. And the law of karma is what's sometimes called the law of cause and effect, which means that every action of body, speech, and mind has an impact. What we think and say and do ripples because we're all part of one fabric. It's all one world, and everything is connected. So there's this ripple effect. Yeah. The Buddha is reputed to have said, if you try to understand cause and effect, the law of karma, you will go crazy because it's not linear. And you may have noticed this. Sometimes you do something really good and you still get a headache, or whatever. Like, wait, I just did all these good deeds, because the timing isn't necessarily our timing. And also because it's not like A plus B equals C. It's more like all of what we call causes and conditions, myriad causes and conditions from past, present, and future come together to create this moment. And you can't possibly track it all. But we can do our best. And what doing our best means is what I like to talk about is the arc of karma. The arc of karma is that there is a beginning, a middle, and an end. The beginning of an action is the intention to speak, the intent to act. We often miss that. As we practice, as we meditate, we begin to create the capacity to start to notice our intention more clearly. So there's the intention, and then the action, and then the impact. We can't control the impact. You all know that. You've done things that you thought were good and somebody didn't like it, right? You've also done things that you might have thought were terrible, and actually it was beneficial. So you don't get to control the impact, but you should pay attention to it. Because if you're walking around thinking you're doing good and you're actually stomping on people, they will let you know. That's getting feedback about the impact. But in Buddhism, the key is the intention. The key is the intention because we don't control the outcome, the impact. But we can pay attention to our intention. And that intention is what determines these realms. When we find ourselves in the animal realm, we can go, just pause, right? When we find ourselves in any reactive pattern, we can not do, which is often a very not well fully appreciated form of doing, right? Not doing. Yeah. And we can start to notice what's our intention in speaking or hitting send or taking action. This isn't meant to create a kind of self-criticism. It's meant to help us wake up. because that waking up is essential to our freedom. Freedom is about having choice. And when we're in patterns of reactivity, we are not choosing. We don't get to choose what happens. I'm sorry to say, because if I could choose, it would be a different world. This is not the world I would choose. There are wonderful things that I couldn't even imagine. They're so good I couldn't even imagine them. And there are things that are so horrible that I also couldn't imagine, right? So this is not the world of my making. It is the world which I am connected to and I can have an impact on. And the way that I do that is by clarifying as best I can my intention so that I can act from a place of what is important to me, what matters, rather than just reactivity. So in this wheel of life, this you can go look this up online and you'll see the picture of it. At the center of the wheel of life is this image of three animals: a rooster, a pig, and a snake. And each one is biting the next one's tail. So they're kind of chasing each other around and around. And these represent greed, hatred, and delusion. This is what turns the wheel of samsara. And really what's understood is that it's ignorance that's at the center, that our lack of understanding. That's why we practice insight. We want to see things clearly. We want to have insight that will dispel our ignorance. And it's out of the ignorance that we are constantly grasping and pushing away, right? Greed and aversion, wanting and hating, or judging, or not liking, or trying to get rid of. All of that comes out of ignorance. And what's the ignorance? On one side, we might say it's the ignorance of believing in a solid, separate self that we need to protect and defend and so on. We misunderstand the truth of our deep connectedness. So we say there is an illusion of separation, that we're separate, that we're independent. Believing the illusion is delusion. We don't need to get rid of the illusion. We will continue to look and think that you're over here and I'm over there. That's fine. But when we believe that to be the whole truth, and we miss the understanding of this web of being that we inhabit together, that's delusion. And it's out of that delusion that we react in these ways. Grasping after what's pleasant, pushing away what's unpleasant, trying to get what we want, trying to get away from what we don't want. This is what sends us into these different realms. So if freedom isn't about getting whatever we want, then what does it mean? And I've already said a bit, but it means that we have a choice. We have a choice in how we respond. And I'm going to give you some examples that I have been inspired by. So the first, and quotes from these folks, but the first many of you are probably familiar with is Viktor Frankl, who wrote Man's Search for Meaning. And he was a survivor of the concentration camps in the Holocaust. And I'll read you what he said. Everything can be taken from us, but one thing, the last human freedom, is to choose one's attitude in any given situation. So what do we choose? And in his own story, you hear the choices he made, the choices to help the other people in the camp, the choices that allowed his heart to stay open even as his body was literally starving, a terrible situation. Similar story or kind of inspiration in the story of Nelson Mandela, right? Spent all those years in prison, who befriended his jailers, right? Who was treated very, very badly, but chose something. Here's his words as he was approaching being released from prison. He said, "As I walked out of the door of prison to the gate that would lead to my freedom, I knew if I didn't leave my bitterness and hatred behind, I would still be in prison." We don't get to choose what happens. Doesn't mean we can't go and protest and take action and try to prevent more harm from happening. But we can respond. We can choose how we respond. This is our freedom. Some of you may have heard about this story of this young woman she has a new book out, and there's a Netflix series about her. Her name's Amanda Knox. Yeah. And she was falsely accused of the murder of her roommate, and she was in her 20s. As a college student who'd gone abroad, and she spent 4 years in an Italian prison, wrongly accused. No one would believe her. And I heard an interview with her because she's promoting her Netflix series and her new book, which is called Free. And the thing about her that struck me the most was at some point she said, at some point I got kind of a rebellious streak in me, and I felt like they can take everything. They can take the truth. They can they can put me in jail. They can, on and on and on. She said, but they can't take this. And she, in a way, almost out of anger, but really out of a sense of, I'm not going to let them take everything. When she was in prison, befriended the other women who were in the jail because she was educated. She could both speak and write Italian, so she became the letter writer for the other women in the jail. And she befriended this priest who, over time, little by little, kind of listened to her and slowly came to believe her. And eventually, the case was overturned. And the really interesting thing here as well is that she chose to go back to Italy and meet with the prosecutor who lied and put her in jail, and to forgive him. So that, just as you heard from Mandela, in some way, she knew that if she held on to the bitterness of all of the things that were clearly wrongly done to her, that she wouldn't be free. She might be right, but she wouldn't be free. I have a young teacher who I mentor, and it's one of her great lines. She says, "We all have a choice. Do we want to be right, or do we want to be free?" I think that's very useful, especially in moments of high charge. Right? So Frankl says, between stimulus and response, between whatever comes in, sight, sound, smells, tastes, words, interactions, and between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space lies our freedom. So this is important because it really points to our practice. And it's so easy, I think, to feel in the Saha world with so much difficulty everywhere that practicing meditation may feel indulgent or selfish or self-serving. But if we are going to learn to act from a place that's not making things worse, then we need to discover that space in our own moment-to-moment experience. And that's what we're doing when we practice. We're not sitting so that we have more pleasant experience. We may come in hoping for that. I did. Please, more pleasant, usually that's not how it goes. But what we get actually is something so much better. What we get is the capacity to meet what comes, to really fully enjoy pleasant when it's pleasant without holding on and, wringing its neck. And we learn to not add fuel to the flames, as it were, when things are hard. So I wanted to say a few more words just from the perspective of the Satipatthana Sutta, which is the sutta that we use as the basis of the meditation practice that we do, because it's built in. The opening lines of the Satipatthana Sutta say, there is a way. So it's so beautiful. There is a way, a direct path. And then he says, for the perfection of beings, for the surmounting of sorrow and lamentation, for the disappearance of discontent, for acquiring the true method, and for the realization of nibbana, of freedom, of liberation. And what is this way? It is these 4 satipatthanas. And the 4 satipatthanas are what we use to teach meditation. And they are, the first is what's called kaya, which is the body. And each of these satipatthanas, we're learning a different way of relating to. So when we are relating to the kaya, to the body, first of all, most of us are not relating to our bodies much. We're lugging them around. So we're using them to get someplace. So in meditative practice, we shift from the body as an object to the body as a subject. We shift from the body as an idea of something that we're going to clothe and dress and make look as nice as we can as we age, to this experience, this actual living, breathing, wow, that, right? So most of us spend our time up here. That's what place our world puts us. So this first foundation of mindfulness, the kaya, the satipatthana, that is the body and breath, is a shift from here down. And what does that do? It sends us into the present, because our thoughts and emotions are always spinning, into the past and future. But the body and breath, that's why we start there. It's an invitation to come into the moment, to be right here, right here. This is a reorienting. This is the first foundation. The second foundation I've been talking about is Vedana, which is what's called feeling tone, but it basically means starting to notice that every moment of experience is pleasant or unpleasant or neutral. Mostly we don't notice neutral, so I don't emphasize that so much. But we start to see that we're having pleasant and unpleasant experience, and we start to see all of our reactivity. So the shift, the change in our relationship to pleasant and unpleasant isn't that we should sit and suffer, but that we can actually be with pleasant experience without grabbing it. We can actually be with unpleasant experience as unpleasant experience without tightening against it or judging ourselves or somebody else for why it's happening. We simplify. That's a big shift for most of us. That's the second foundation. The Vedana. The third is what's called chitta, which we think of as mind, but in this context, it really means what's called mental states. And mental states, we think of mental states as thinking, but here it really is the whole tangle of thoughts and feelings and memories and plans. And it's all of those states of mind that go pouring through, don't they? While we sit, we come in thinking, I would like the mind to be quiet. And then we get this like quadraphonic stereo as we sit down of like, right? So how do we shift our relationship to that? Well, fundamentally, when we come to meditation, we often think I need to get rid of my thoughts. No, no, no. No, we need to relate to our thoughts in a different way, not grasping, not pushing away, just letting them move through like clouds in a sky. You can have thoughts, but like taking illusion and turning it into delusion by believing it, you just don't believe your thoughts. Your thoughts are just your thoughts. Have you noticed the crazy shit your mind says to you? Unbelievable sometimes. I can't believe, like, what are you talking about? It just makes stuff up, goes on and on. It creates vendettas. It's like, come on. But we can learn to relate to it differently. We don't have to get rid of it. Right? It's like saying we don't have to be angry at our anger. We just let it be anger. We just let thoughts be thoughts. Like, hello, hello, thoughts. Aren't you kind of cute in all of your huffiness or your righteousness or your, like that? That's a big one for us, right? Sometimes I think that the chitta, mental states, is the third foundation because it's a hard one for most of us. It's very sticky, mental states. We may not even know that we're believing our thoughts. It's very subtle. And sometimes they're not just thoughts, they're actually beliefs and assumptions that are buried under. And it can take a while for us to get to those, right? That are actually determining the choices we make, deterring our freedom in some way. So the practice isn't to get rid of anything, but to see it all clearly, right? And in that clear seeing, we have that space that Frankl is talking about. And in that space, we have a choice. We can have a choice, right? The last one is the most confusing in a certain way. It's called dhammas. And if you look at the list in the 4 foundations of mindfulness, it's a bunch of lists. I think of dhammas as not just mental states, but our karmic patterning. And there's patterns that we begin to see that are internal and external, or we could say personal and existential. Like we may notice a universal pattern, which is that everything is impermanent, everything is changing. That's a pattern. It's not a particular state. We may also start to notice personal patterns, and this is where the Dharma really gets good, because this is where we really start to get free, is when we begin to encounter our own patterning that we don't think of as patterning. It's just the way we are. When we start to bump up against, and that's usually how it happens, right? We're going along and then we bump up against somebody who has different patterning, say, right? Or someone who has different points of view or whatever it is. Now we have a real chance to untangle this long chain of karma that's been passed down and down and down and down. And now we really find big slices of freedom. And it can be difficult. It can be disorienting because we are usually, oops, that doesn't fill in. We're really identified, not just with our thoughts, but especially with these patterns that cut a bit deeper. So again, it may feel to us in the world, in the Saha world of so much difficulty, that practice isn't enough, that again, meditation is somehow indulgent. And in some way, practice isn't enough. We do want to act. It's important that we act, that we speak, that we do, and sometimes that we don't do. But where are we acting from? Where are we speaking from? The practice is giving us a possibility of choosing to act not just out of our karmic habits, not just out of our reactivity. Because I don't think we're going to solve the problems we're facing today with the same mind that created them, right? Whether Einstein said it or not, it's true. It's too much. It's too big. It's going to have to come from someplace else. And this, you giving yourself an opportunity to learn to relate to your own experience in a different way, opens that possibility, opens the possibility for something we may not be able to see from here, because probably that's what's going to take. That the real ability to respond to the onslaught of dukkha, of suffering all around us, is going to take something that I can't see from here. And I'm not going to withdraw and go hide, but I am going to keep staying with and looking for how can I make choices in what I say and do and how I am that come from that choice, that freedom. That's what our practice offers. Started. So as we bring our evening to a close, just take a moment to feel into any goodness, any insight, any benefit, any sense of possibility that may have been stirred in you. And really letting that fully soak in, taking it on, taking it in. And then in this spirit of generosity, opening our hands, opening our hearts, and freely, fully sharing. May any of the goodness gathered by our coming together this evening be generously offered for the benefit of all beings everywhere. By the power and truth of our practice, may we together with all beings be free from suffering, and may we all awaken and be free. Thank you all very much for your kind attention. I hope I'll see you soon.